You don't make a man feel erased by blocking his number. You don't make him regret by deleting photos. You make him feel erased when your energy no longer exists in his world, not physically, but emotionally. When your laughter is no longer in his ear, when your name doesn't light up his screen, when your presence fades not out of anger, but out of peace, that's when regret truly begins to haunt him. You see, many women think that erasing a man from their life requires grand gestures. Silence, disappearing, even blocking. But what hurts more than silence is indifference. What shakes him to his core is when you stop reacting, stop waiting, and stop needing him to acknowledge your worth. He once treated your emotions like a playground, safe, predictable, always there. He thought your heart was a space he could return to whenever he felt like it. But when a woman truly pulls her energy away, when she emotionally detaches not as a performance, not as a game, but as a declaration of self-worth, everything changes. He doesn't just notice the silence. He feels the emptiness, because you were more than just words and attention. You were a connection. You were the energy that made his life feel grounded. And now it's gone. Let's be honest. At first, he might not even notice. He's distracted. His ego tells him you'll be back. But slowly, his world starts to shift. Things feel a little colder. Other women don't feel like you. Conversations feel shallower. His confidence starts to slip. Why? Because the emotional support he didn't even realize he was relying on is no longer there. You're not texting. You're not checking in. You're not reacting. You're not even watching his stories. That's when the emotional echo disappears, and suddenly he realizes the sound of you is gone. And here's the powerful truth. It's not your absence that breaks him, it's your peace. Because for the first time, he sees you smiling in photos without trying to make him jealous. For the first time, he hears about you from others, and you haven't mentioned his name once. For the first time, he wonders if you're really gone not to get a reaction, but to get healed, and that realization. It cuts deeper than any good by text ever could. This isn't about playing games. It's not about getting revenge. It's about letting him experience the void he created when he treated you like an afterthought. It's about stepping back so he can finally see the space you used to fill. You're not erasing him to hurt him. You're erasing him because he no longer deserves to exist in the story you're rewriting. This isn't punishment, this is closure, this is power. He thought he'd always have access to your emotions. He thought the door would always be unlocked, maybe not open, but always accessible, and now the door is closed, the key has been melted, the lock is gone. The man who once took your presence for granted now starts to feel something unfamiliar, irrelevance. He may not admit it out loud. His ego might still try to protect him. But late at night, in silence, with no one around to impress, that's when the echo of you returns. And this time, it's not a voice calling his name. It's the echo of regret whispering, you lost something you'll never find again. Because let's face it, it's easy to miss someone who's always there. It's harder when they're gone and have nothing left to prove. So if you're wondering how to make him regret losing you, don't beg. Don't chase, don't perform, just disappear emotionally. Let the version of you that once craved him dissolve. Let the new version of you, the one who chooses herself, rise in silence. Because when you stop echoing in his world, his mind becomes loud with one thing, your absence. And that's when the regret becomes real. But here's the truth. Most men don't give closure because they never expected to lose you in the first place. They leave doors open, they stay half present, they disappear without warning, then show up like nothing happened. And all the while, they expect you to still be standing in the same emotional place they left you. What they don't expect is silence, a silence that isn't rooted in pain or performance, but in detachment. A silence that doesn't ask for closure because closure was found within. A silence that doesn't punish but protects. When a woman learns to let silence be the final word, something powerful happens. She stops asking questions that will never be answered. She stops waiting for a truth that will never come. She stops allowing a man's confusion to be the reason she stays stuck. This kind of silence speaks. Loudly it says, I no longer need your explanation. It says, your indecision is no longer my suffering. It says, I've reclaimed my energy, and you no longer get access to it. He notices. Even if he doesn't admit it, he feels it. At first, he may test it sending a message, liking a post, checking in. But the moment you don't respond the way you used to, a shift begins. That silence becomes deafening to him, not because it's empty, but because it's full of meaning. Because it represents something he never expected, that you've moved on without needing his permission. Men chase women who stop explaining. They crave the attention of women who no longer need it. And they regret losing women who no longer need closure. You gave him your voice for long enough. You tried to make him understand. You bent, compromised, explained, justified, apologized just to make it work. And it didn't. Now it's time to let silence speak on your behalf. Because silence says what your words never could. That you're not waiting anymore. That you're done seeking validation. That you're too valuable to keep begging for respect you always deserved. It's in that silence that he finally hears the truth. He hears the version of you that no longer needs him. He hears the peace in your absence. He hears the goodbye that was never spoken, but is now undeniable. When he calls and you don't answer. When he texts and you take your time or don't reply at all. When he watches you glow without his presence, that's when it clicks. You don't need closure. You already healed. Silence is not revenge. It's not manipulation. It's emotional intelligence. It's you saying, my peace is louder than your confusion. And it's often in your absence that he realizes your value. But the most beautiful part, by the time he realizes what you were, who you were, and what he lost, you'll have become someone even stronger. So no, you don't need to chase answers. You don't need to send the final message. You don't need to explain your silence. Let him feel it. Let him sit in the space where your voice used to be. Let your silence be your evolution. Because when you choose not to explain yourself anymore, when you stop making noise in someone's life, just to be heard, you stop being background noise and become the echo of everything they now regret. Silence will always speak louder than closure, and it always says the same thing. You're gone, you're done, you're free. But then came the plot twist he never expected. You stopped writing about him. Not on your page, not in your texts, not even in your thoughts. He wasn't erased out of spite. He was edited out for peace. That's when his world started shifting. Not when you disappeared from his phone, but when he disappeared from your mind. Because a man can feel when he no longer has a role in your life, and when you no longer speak of him, think of him, center him, he senses that power shift. He feels it in his gut. He no longer gets updates. He no longer gets reactions. He's not the reason behind your glow anymore. You took back the pen and rewrote the story. And in this new chapter, he's not the villain. He's not even a side character. He's nothing. That's what drives him insane. Not because you hate him, but because your peace has made him irrelevant. You see, most men don't believe they can be forgotten. They believe they can ghost you, hurt you, ignore you, and still live rent, free in your head. Because they know they've had an emotional impact. They fed off that attention, even if it came from pain. But the moment you remove them from the narrative, the moment your story no longer needs their name to be powerful, That's when their illusion of control breaks, when he scrolls through your posts and sees joy that doesn't trace back to him, when he hears your name in conversations and realizes you're not even speaking about him. When mutual friends mention you and he senses that he's no longer relevant in your life, that's when he starts to feel something he didn't prepare for, regret, not because you were dramatic, not because you caused chaos, but because you evolved in silence and moved on without needing revenge. You rebuilt your identity and left no space for his shadow. He was once the one you thought of when your phone lit up. Now he's the one who lights up at the thought that you might still remember him. He craved your attention. Now he starves in the absence of it. Because here's the reality. When you remove someone from your emotional story, you also remove their power to hurt you. He no longer defines your mood. He no longer gets access to your heart. And that disconnection isn't something he can fix with a text or a call. It's permanent. This isn't about proving anything. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about actually not caring anymore. You healed the wound he left without needing him to come back and bandage it. And the result? He starts to feel small in a story where he once felt irreplaceable. Men don't chase women who cry louder. They chase women who walk away quieter. Women who close the book without slamming it. Women who disappear without an announcement and never look back. So if you want him to come running back in regret, don't block him out of anger. Don't post your healing for attention. Don't rewrite the story to include him again. Just write your next chapter so full of self, love, peace, and freedom that the man who once took your love for granted can no longer recognize the woman he thought he could play with. He won't know how to reach you anymore, not because you're gone, but because you've grown. And in this new chapter, there's no room for someone who had to lose you to see your value. Remove him from your narrative. Let the silence fill the space he used to occupy. Let your peace be the proof that you never needed his part in your story to be complete. Because once a man realizes he's no longer the hero, no longer the antagonist, no longer anything at all, that's when the real regret begins. Because as long as he had access to your time, to your heart, to your emotions, he never had to commit. He could come and go, test your limits, push your boundaries. Hurt you and expect forgiveness, pull away and expect your chase, leave and expect to return, and why wouldn't he? You were always there. You made it easy. Your heart stayed open even when his actions shut you down. But there comes a moment in a woman's life where something changes, not because she becomes angry, but because she becomes awakened. She sees the pattern, she sees the games, and most importantly, she sees her worth. That's when everything shifts, not because she sends a dramatic message, not because she begs for closure, but because she decides he doesn't get access anymore. No more late night conversations that lead nowhere. No more replying to half-hearted messages, no more waiting for his mood to change so he can treat her right. She becomes unavailable, and that, more than anything, is what triggers him, not your silence. Not your strength, but the loss of access, the access he thought he'd always have. Men often don't value presence until they feel distance. They don't recognize your light until they're standing in your shadow. And they don't feel fear until the door to your world finally locks. You see, emotional access is powerful. When a woman gives her energy to a man, her time, her empathy, her softness, she's giving him something sacred. But when that man treats it casually, when he handles it like an option, she must do the most powerful thing she can do. Withdraw it, without warning, without announcement, without begging for him to notice. She simply closes the gate, and at first he may act like he doesn't care. He'll pretend it doesn't affect him, but with every day that passes, reality starts to settle in. She's no longer reachable. He'll test it. He'll poke the wall. He'll try to climb the fence. He'll send a message, react to a story, or ask mutual friends about her just to see if he still matters. But when none of those attempts break her silence, when none of those old tricks work anymore, that's when panic sets in, because men always assume there's a way back in, until they find out there isn't, not because she's playing games, but because she's done. And when a woman is truly done, she doesn't slam the door, she simply disappears behind it. She doesn't curse his name, she forgets it. She doesn't pretend to be happy, she actually becomes it. Her peace becomes louder than her pain ever was. That's the power of no access. He once thought you'd always be reachable, that you'd always respond, that you'd always make space. Now, he sees the no vacancy a sign, and not because someone else took his place, but because you filled the space with self-love. And he'll regret it. He'll remember how easily you forgave. He'll remember how deep you loved. He'll remember how available you once were, and how unreachable you've become, and that regret will ache. Because deep down, he knows this was never about games. It was about what he could have had and lost forever. So here's the truth. If you want him to come running back in regret, you don't need to block him. You don't need to punish him. You just need to remove his access. Stop explaining. Stop reacting. Stop making him feel like he still matters. Because when he realizes that his messages go unseen, his name gets no response, his presence gets no reaction. That's when it hits. He's no longer a part of your world, and that absence, it screams louder than any goodbye ever could. He believed that no matter how far he pushed, how long he vanished, or how many empty promises he made, you'd still be there. Still loving, still waiting, still hurting but available, because every time he pulled away, you reached out. Every time he went cold, you warmed the conversation. Every time he treated you like an afterthought, you tried harder to be remembered. That's why he never feared losing you. Not because he didn't know you were valuable, but because he assumed he had time. Time to come back, time to fix things, time to keep you on the emotional leash until he figured himself out. But then one day, you stopped. You didn't warn him. You didn't explain it. You didn't announce your exit. You simply became unavailable emotionally, mentally, energetically. And that's when something strange started happening. He got confused. He started checking your social media more often. He hovered over the send button without pressing it. He reread old conversations, trying to find the version of you who used to be desperate for his attention. But you weren't there, because you had evolved into someone he didn't recognize, someone whose silence wasn't bitterness, it was peace, someone whose absence wasn't punishment, it was clarity, someone whose distance wasn't temporary. It was transformation. You became a mystery, and men can't help but chase what they don't understand. You see, when you were predictable, he felt in control. When you were emotional, he felt needed. When you were always available, he felt important. But now you're quiet, you're composed, you're detached. You don't ask questions anymore. You don't seek validation. You don't send long texts explaining your worth. And that silence is deafening to him. He starts wondering, is she seeing someone else? Did she really move on? Why doesn't she care anymore? What happened to the girl who used to fight for me? The answer is simple. She found herself. She stopped chasing clarity from someone who only offered confusion. She stopped investing in someone who treated her like a backup plan. She stopped handing over her heart to someone who couldn't even handle a conversation. She stopped trying to be understood and started becoming undeniable, and in doing so, she triggered something he didn't expect, curiosity, then panic, then regret, because the more you become a mystery, the more a man obsesses over what he lost. He starts imagining your life without him. He pictures you glowing, smiling, laughing, and he hates that he's not the reason. He watches from the sidelines as you reclaim your power, and he realizes he no longer has a backstage pass. And suddenly, he wants back in, but not because he's changed, not because he's grown, but because he can't stand, not knowing how you became so powerful without him. Because here's what men won't say out loud. They regret losing the woman who became unrecognizable because she finally loved herself enough to become inaccessible. You were once his comfort zone. Now you're the lesson he'll never forget. Not because you yelled, not because you begged, but because you left him with nothing but questions. You became the woman who no longer explains herself, who no longer waits, who no longer tries to make broken things work. And that's what makes you unforgettable. So let him wonder, let him guess, let him feel the absence that used to be filled with your love. You don't need revenge. You don't need to show him what he lost. Because the version of you he once knew is gone, and the woman you've become, she's too focused on herself to ever look back. That's the real power. Be the mystery he can't solve. Be the silence that speaks louder than words. Be the peace that can't be disturbed by his chaos, because when he realizes he no longer has access to the old you, he'll come running not to love you, but to chase the version of you he let slip away. And by then it'll be too late. Of a woman who no longer gives her energy to someone who couldn't hold it with care. That silence is what changes everything. When he treated you like an option, you still tried. You gave him access to your heart. You explained your worth. You defended your love like it was something he couldn't already feel. But here's the truth. He felt it. He just didn't value it, because what's always available rarely gets appreciated. What's always responsive gets taken for granted, and what's always chasing doesn't get chased in return. He thought you'd always be reachable, and that was his biggest mistake, because there comes a moment in every woman's journey when she stops explaining. She stops hoping. She stops trying to convince a man to choose her, respect her, or see her, and instead, she disappears emotionally. That's when he starts to notice, not when you're blowing up his phone, not when you're posting quotes to get his attention, not when you're waiting for his response. No, he notices when you're silent, when you're calm, when you're no longer available to be hurt by the same hands twice. That's when panic sets in. That's when regret builds, because in his mind, you were a permanent fixture, not a fleeting presence. He never thought you'd actually walk away. Not you. Not the one who gave so much. Not the one who forgave too often. Not the one who stayed, even when staying hurt. But you did. And you didn't announce it. You simply moved differently. You started answering slower, then not at all. You stopped explaining your silence. You stopped showing up where he expected you to be. You became unreachable not because you're trying to hurt him, but because you finally chose to protect yourself. That's when he starts replaying everything, the ignored messages, the late replies, the way he made you feel invisible while expecting you to shine just for him. And he begins to miss you not just for what you gave, but for who you were. Because here's what most men don't realize in time. You were the safe space, the one who saw beyond his ego, the one who gave grace when he didn't deserve it, the one who stood by him when he didn't even know how to stand by himself. And he'll miss that, he'll crave that, but he won't be able to reach it again, because the version of you that begged, that chased, that waited, she's gone. She was replaced by a woman who values her own peace more than his potential. By a woman who doesn't care if he regrets because she's not living her life hoping for his realization. By a woman who doesn't hold space for people who let go of her with ease. That's how you make him feel erased. Not by being cruel, not by blocking and unblocking, but by becoming so focused on your own healing, your own glow, your own growth, that he simply fades into the background of your story and he'll feel it. He'll scroll through old pictures. He'll wonder what you're doing now. He'll think about the conversations that used to fill his nights. He'll try to come back just to see if there's still a door open. But it won't be, because this time it's not a test. It's not a strategy. It's not a game. It's a decision. You decided that being treated like an afterthought wasn't enough for you. You decided that being loved inconsistently wasn't love. You decided that your energy was too sacred to be wasted on someone who couldn't even give you clarity, and that decision made you powerful. So now, when he reaches out, he'll find silence. When he tries to reconnect, he'll realize he's lost the signal. When he finally wants to love you the right way, he'll see you've already left the room. That's how it ends, not with revenge, not with anger, but with you becoming the woman he simply can't reach anymore. And in that distance, in that quiet space where you used to be, he will come running back in regret, but it won't matter, because by the time he realizes who you were, you'll be too far gone to look back.